We are recording and we're ready to begin.
Thank you. So good evening and welcome to the November 4th, 2020 Historic Site Preservation Board monthly meeting. May I have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Member Rosenau? Member Nelson?
Present.
Member Kaiser?
Here.
Member Dixon is excused. Member Huff?
Present.
And Chair Burkett?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. May I have a report on the posting of the agenda, please?
The agenda for this meeting was posted for public review at the City Hall Bulletin Board and at the Planning Department counter in accordance with law.
Does the board have any revisions to the agenda? If not, I would like to make a motion to accept the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So we have a first by Member Burkett and a second by Member, is that tied? I think between Eric Rosenau.
Yay!
All right. Okay. So
We need a vote on that, Mr. Chair.
in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. So let's move to public comments. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Historic Site Preservation Board on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Although the Historic Site Preservation Board values your comments, pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. There will be 3 minutes assigned for each speaker. Testimony for public hearings will be taken at the time of the hearing, and we have one this evening. Staff, has anyone requested to speak at public comments?
Mr. Chair, we haven't had anybody contact us regarding public comment. I see there are a couple of names on the screen, and I'm assuming they're simply observers today.
Okay, thank you very much. So then I will now close public comments and move on to the consent calendar, item 1A, which is approval of the minutes for October the 6th, 2020 HSBB meeting. Does anyone have changes to the minute? Okay, I'm going to recuse myself from voting because, as you know, I was not able to attend that meeting due to health reasons. So I'm going to ask if there's a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I will so move. Second.
We have a first by Member Kaiser and a second by Mr. Nelson. So any further discussion, board? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. So let's proceed to public hearings. 2A for Roswitha Smale, owner requesting Class 1 historic site designation of the Henry Pearson residence located at 573 North Kaweah Drive. May I have a staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted in your staff report, this is a report application on the Pearson residence at 573 North Kaweah Road. In your staff report, you'll see that the information regarding the evaluation of this property against the criteria in the ordinance begins on page 4. They have identified that this particular site is significant because of its association with Henry Pearson, who was a leading expert and scholar in the development of the rubber industry. The report notes that he had gone on throughout his career, even into retirement. He was still a predominant expert in this and was often consulted. The report does address the question of a person of significance relative to his period of productive years. And the report asserts, as it's noted on page 30, that his prominence continued until his death, and thus the report is asserting that the site is associated with Pearson during his productive period. It's also noting that it represents or reflects or exemplifies a period in local history. That is the period between the wars, 1919 to 1941, when the Spanish and Mediterranean revival styles were the predominant architectural choice in Palm Springs and much of the southwestern United States. As we've noted, most of these type of buildings in Palm Springs were very modest from this period, and you can find many of them scattered throughout the city. This particular one is distinctive because of its overall architectural composition and its attention to the subtle detailing, reflecting the design proficiency of a trained architect who is John Edward Barnard, the nephew of Henry Pearson. So the report asserts that this building is significant and qualified as a exemplar of the period of between the wars. The report also addresses the Pearson residence, not so much in terms of the architect being a genius who influenced his age, but rather for its noteworthy artistic, stylistic design, that there's a subtle but distinctive details and a relaxed symmetry of the Pearson residence, which sets it apart from many other smaller homes found in the older sections of Palm Springs done during this period. So the report asserts that it is of high artistic value. Those are the three criteria that the report asserts that the Pearson residence is qualified under for consideration as a historic site. The next part of your report addresses the evaluation of integrity. And as you'll note in your report, that the building did have some modifications that were done in the 1960s, including an addition off the south side of the home and the creation of a roof terrace. It notes that although there were some modifications, the design alterations are harmonious in their aesthetic and they are complementary to the overall composition of the home. The other factors of integrity are noted as well, that the setting, materials, workmanship, and feeling is really pretty much still intact and with a good degree of integrity. It is noted under feeling, of course, that the garden and yards have become much more lush and verdant considering all the grass and plantings from what you would probably experience during the 1930s. And obviously from the image that you saw in the front of the home, the original setting of the home was much more desert-like. However, the home still does retain a significant degree of integrity, according to the report. On page 7 of your staff report are the identifying character-defining features of this site. The non-contributing features are the guest house that was built in the 1970s, the pool and the hot tub, the roof terrace and stairs, the kitchen extension, the barbecue, the fountain, and the landscaping, with the exception of the 2 twin palm trees that are on either side of the entry, which are credited for having been planted by Pearson and having been brought over from his Deep Well Ranch property that he owned in the 1920s. So that concludes my staff report. As noted, this property has been qualified as a potential historic site with both integrity and the criteria findings being affirmatively made, which would make it eligible for Class 1 historic designation. The author of the report, Melissa Ritchie, is here, and she can answer any other questions you may have, and I'm available as well, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you. Board, are there questions of staff first? Seeing no questions of staff, I will open the public hearing.
Jade has one, Dick.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Jade has a question.
Yeah, I did have a question for staff. I think I know the answer, but I want to ask to clarify anyway. When we make our motion to recommend this, even though the roof terrace and stairs are not original historic character defining features, could we, if we wanted to, include them to be, include the roof terrace and stairs to be modern day character defining features, so that in the future, if someone wanted to remove that roof terrace and stairs, they couldn't, because my fear is by not including it in the designation as a contributing feature, even though it's not an original historic feature, is that a future owner could remove or enclose that roof deck, and it is such a integral part of the site now.
Well, my recommendation on that, Member Nelson, is that, again, you want to focus on those aspects of the home that define its period of significance, which are those factors that were put in place and built from the time of its construction, 1930. Those areas and features that were built after the fact, a future homeowner should have the prerogative and the authority or the right to remove those things should they wish to do so. Given the very charming nature of those features, I would surmise to say that it's probably highly unlikely that someone would want to remove them, as they are certainly a charming and interesting feature on the home. But I would not recommend that you include them as the character defining features.
Okay, thank you for that. Understood. And also, if, let's say, a future owner were to decide to remove the roof terrace or enclose it, they would have to make an application, and that would go before the historic preservation officer or the board for review.
You are absolutely correct.
But would it be both or one or the other?
It would be one or the other depending on the nature and the magnitude of the proposed alteration.
Okay, great. Just wanted to clarify all that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, great idea and question. Are there any other questions of staff? Seeing no further questions, then I will open the public hearing. Are there any other members of the public who signed up wishing to speak on this item?
Mr. Chair, we did not receive any other requests for public comment other than the author of the report, Melissa Ritchie.
Yes, I'd like to invite Ms. Ritchie, if she would like to say a few words, please.
You're muted, Melissa.
Okay. Now you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm delighted to be able to speak about this property. I think it's a really significant house in Palm Springs, and I didn't even realize the significance until I started doing my digging and discovered more about Pearson, and then about the architect, and then about the relationship between Pearson, the architect, and in fact Pearson's companion for all his life, who was Esther Pearson, who was always described as his daughter, but turned out to be his niece and Barnard's sister. So they kept it in the family. Pearson obviously was very thrilled and delighted to have his nephew design this house for him at a time when his architecture practice was struggling because of the Great Depression. And so this house to me just seemed to have so much historical significance as well as personal significance to Henry Pearson that the story unfolded. And as you could probably tell from the report, I always get a little bit carried away with my research.
No, actually, I wanted to comment on that, Melissa. I thought it was an excellent report that bringing up so much information that I don't think was that well known, maybe by many, even in the preservation community. And I thought it was an excellent report that I really enjoyed actually digging. And I know how you start off with one thing, and heaven knows where you're going to go and what that's going to lead you to the next.
Well, one of the biggest challenges, and I'm sure you've run into this with other older homes of this era, especially 1930s or earlier, is that none of the houses at the time had street numbers. So essentially what I start out doing is a process of elimination, and I went back to the very earliest phone books, which only had about 100 different names in them. And I kept on finding Pearson on Cahuilla, and I kept on thinking, you know, this just says something to me. And purely by chance, I went back and looked through the photo archives of the Palm Springs Historical Society, entered the name Pearson, bingo, the picture of the house popped up. And I went, Roswitha, this is your house. So, I mean, instinct and serendipity are the fuel which drives researchers.
Who says preservation can't be fun? Mr. Nelson.
Totally.
A few things. So, question for Melissa Ritchie. In your research, did you find by chance, because of Pearson's long history with the area and Deepwater Ranch, did you happen to find if this architect, Barnard, did anything else for him or anything in Palm Springs other than this house?
No, so I actually managed to track down one of Barnard's granddaughters. That's also, you know, a fun place to go. And thankfully, they had the father and grandfather, well, Barnard was this woman's grandfather. His son had also ended up in practice with him, and they had kept the whole document which detailed all the projects that the father and son had done over, you know, this particular document was published in the 1960s, so going back to the 30s, and every single project in there, and there were hundreds, every single project was East Coast, most of it New England, a few in Florida, but very few. And this was the only one in Palm Springs. And it actually said Palm Springs next to it. And I was like, okay, well, case proven. So no, that was it. He came out here, he just did that project for his uncle, and then the recession, you know, he was doing a lot of watercolors during the Great Depression, and he was having exhibitions in Palm Springs. I discovered a couple of notes about exhibitions of his watercolors in Palm Springs, as well as in Boston, where he had quite a reputation. But he was kind of scratching a living like most architects, and I guess he just spent time having a good time with his uncle, and you know, you probably know better than I do that people like Alva Hicks and you know, a couple of local architects like Benedict and so on were working in the city, and they probably had in the town or village as it was then, and they probably had the work sort of wrapped up, and you know, there wasn't a lot of work even in Palm Springs at that time, probably. It's curious. I looked and I hoped, but that was the only one he did.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any other
One
questions?
other thing, this is more just for the board.
Mr. Chair, I don't mean to interrupt, but I would suggest that you finish the public hearing, close the public hearing, and then take questions.
Yeah, that'll come right afterwards, Jade. So I'm going to now close the public hearings, and the action is now with the board. So your comments and questions, please. Mr. Nelson.
Okay, thank you. This is just for the board, really, just a reminder that we did have some exposure to Henry Pearson, and we learned a lot about his connection to Depot Ranch and his affinity for moving palm trees from one property to another. When we were doing some research on the property that's part of the Orchid Tree Inn, and I had asked staff to do an extensive report on those small bungalows on Arenas, just south of the Holiday House. So if you recall that all this information about Henry Pearson and Depot Ranch and palm tree moving came up at that time. So I'm delighted to see where these palm trees actually ended up. And I would love to commend Melissa for connecting all these dots, because it's just really wonderful.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Ms. Huff.
So I want to make two acknowledgements to, of course, Rosita Smale, who has done a wonderful job with the conservation and restoration of this, you know, magnificent property, and to the owners before her, you know, that preserved without too many changes. And of course, we love those watering those palm trees during the summers and keeping them alive. You know, such rich historical property that was preserved by these people over the years. And then to Mrs. Ritchie for your wonderful research and documentation that you've done that has provided, you know, great historical material, you know, to the city of Palm Springs, well beyond what is needed for the historical board, but to, you know, to our archives of the city. So, boy, what a great project. And I'm so delighted to have this this excellent example of asymmetrical. I love the asymmetrical qualities of this Spanish colonial revival style, and I wholeheartedly support it.
Thank you. Member Kaiser.
I think this property transcends all of what it has to meet. It meets the historical properties that we need. But the way that this property has been developed and redeveloped, I know these are non-contributing things, but this is a prime example that we as an historical board can cite as a project that is magnificent without tearing the historic property down. And we have very few of those in Palm Springs. We have a few now. It's starting to happen. Roswitha did this on her own. And I think it's just an amazing example of what we can cite when people are buying an historic property and they're afraid of it and stepping back. I took a tour of Rancho Santa Fe with the Rancho Santa Fe Historic Society that was organized with the Palm Springs Art Museum. I have seen nothing like that in Palm Springs that they showed us. And there were 3 properties, which were all extraordinarily magnificent, but the same idea of maintaining the historic property and then redeveloping the property around it to make it like this amazing, unusual place. So, you know, we can't include every part of this property in the historic designation, but we as a board and you as a city can use this to cite and help preserve these properties. So I just love it. And thank you, Melissa. And Roswitha loves you, darling. So.
It was so much fun, and I was so happy to do it for Roswitha for all the reasons you said.
Thank you.
And Catherine too, yeah.
And I just have a couple of comments, sort of like following up with what Member Kaiser was saying. What is so tempting on many of these large lots in Las Palmas with the smaller homes on them, such as this, are owners who want to tear down the house, which we've seen many of those in the past, which now we slowed down with the demolition ordinance. But this is an example of someone who has respected and shown the importance of this era. And can't, and the meticulous detail for the ongoing maintenance is true. I mean, you just can't hardly find a flaw as you walk around that property. So this is a good example. I agree with you, Dan, or others, because we've seen too many that have been destroyed and large new things have been put on them in their place. Yes. Member Nelson.
A couple more comments. I think it's only fair here to acknowledge Kevin Comer, who rescued the house and was the one responsible for making sure it didn't get demolished and actually doing the bones of the work, the restoration and the electrical, and bringing it back so that it could go to market and attract a buyer like Roswitha. So Mr. Comer had the property for 4 or 5 years, and now Roswitha has had it for 6. So it's taken 10 years or more to really transform it and bring it to what it is. And, Dan, Member Kaiser is absolutely right that it is better now than it's ever been. And Roswitha shared this at a party that she held at the home for the Architecture and Design Council. And she had Mr. Comer there, and they talked all about, getting the house from the bank and the process of it. And then she talked about finding the family and having them over, one of the previous families that lived there. And they just were beside themselves. Everything that she had done to it, they just said, wow, we can't even imagine that it could be any better than this. So, having all of this modern day landscape that was done by Gino and Troy of Mojave Rock Ranch, that is just phenomenal. I mean, it really brings the house to a whole nother level. And it even though it's not, original contributing features, they are new character defining features of that site. And I can't imagine a future owner ever wanting to come in and remove all of that fantastic landscape, because it really elevates the house to what it is today.
So board, are there any other further questions or comments on the case? Seeing none, may I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to accept the information in the staff report and recommend that the City Council designate the Henry Pearson residence as a Class 1 landmark historic site.
So do I have a second?
I'll second.
So I have a motion by Member Huff and a second by Member Rosenau. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations, Melissa and Roswitha. Okay, so moving down to unfinished business. There are no items tonight under this. So let's move on to new business. Item 4A, Stephen Rose, owner, requesting Class 1 landmark historic site designation of the Sutter residence located at 1207 Calle de Maria. May I have a staff report, please?
Mr. Chair, as noted in your packet, on October 26th, the application materials for this particular application were forwarded to the HSPB members by U.S. mail. Our recommendation tonight is that you receive the report and direct staff to arrange site visits and to schedule a public hearing of the HSPB to consider the application.
Thank you. Board, are there questions of staff? If not, I would like to make a motion to accept the recommendation by staff to receive the historic resources report and direct staff to schedule site visits and a public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a first by myself and a second by Member Huff. Any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, the motion carries 5-0. The next item is our discussion. And the first one is 5A, Conference Planning, Preservation Matters Conference, April 2021. That would be me and our event committee. So, Board, I am just really thrilled that we have been able to revitalize what we were going to have as a live event in April of this year, and to be able to put on this event as a virtual one in April 2021. And when you look at the richness of that program and how many people are involved with making it happen, I'm really delighted that all the presentations are confirmed, except there's just a couple of things that need final confirmation. And one, as I mentioned, is Michael Johnson's Southbridge Cody House. He's definitely interested, and I should hear from him soon. He just asked for some additional time due to a family concern, but he's definitely interested. And then Kate Anderson will get back to us. She's definitely agreed to a presentation. It'll either be the intriguing Tapas Canyon or the Cultural Museum. And I had asked Mr. Lyon, and he sent out a program for each of you to be able to ask questions if you like. I just have one more point I'd like to make. There's another exciting thing that we're working on for this program, and that would be an interesting tie-in with the Shea residents, which was a part of the October 2020 virtual event, a signature tour event that Modernism Week sponsored. And they have graciously offered to let us also use that tour as a virtual event. So Mr. Richard Hubble, clever as he is, has come up with a very, very interesting, fun addition that would couple with that tour. And we have had 4 subcommittee meetings, by the way, since reporting the last update. And we will, you'll be putting that together, and then we will view it as a subcommittee to give its final approval. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So now, if I may, I would like to see if there are any questions by any board members. Member Rosenau.
Just a quick question. Is there a specific date in April that this will be?
Yes, we have talked about having it on I believe it's the 18th. It's yes, it's on the 18th, and when it would go live. Yes, and the great thing is it would go live, and then, but also there would be a period of time that people could watch it. They'll get a link, and we'll come up with a specified period of time that if they're not available at the specific time, they still would be able to enjoy it. Member Kaiser, I think, did I see your hand up? No?
Yeah, I just one thing to say about the tours. I did get other people lined up who would allow their homes to be filmed, and they would do it. But the fact is, we don't really have funding for it. So I think we should save those for when the people can open their houses. We just don't have the money for it. And, the idea was we would ask them to put their house up and then pay for for recording it, which really doesn't work for me. So we shouldn't do what we can't afford. So I think that this thing that the Hubbles have come up with, if it really works, is going to be fun and different, and it's not going to be like, this is the same old thing. The Shea residence is fabulous. The guy who's doing it, I'm sure, is going to be great. And that's already in the can. That doesn't cost us anything.
Right.
So let's keep our powder dry for some of the other houses that we can use in the future. And these are really great houses lined up. So that's just where we are with the tours right now.
I know what you're thinking. You're thinking of 2022, and that is a great thing.
You know what? I'll hang in there till hell freezes over.
Good.
Catherine.
I want to add that the individual presenters and speakers, each individual that's involved, when I contacted them, they were so enthusiastic and didn't hesitate for 1 second that they had more work to do. And they are all so supportive of this Symposium Preservation Matters and the fact that it's offered free, to everyone, and having shorter presentations, but a lot of them that are going to be lively and fun, I think will be greatly entertaining, even though we might not be able to gather in person. But I was so pleased that there was so much support and enthusiasm from our participants. So I think it'll be lively and fun, and we'll make it different, as Dan said. You got to make it different. So we have some kind of outrageous, entertaining ideas that are different.
That's why we have the Hubbles on our team.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, this subcommittee has been really terrific to work with, and I'm so glad that we are also accumulating for 2022. You know, it's my aspiration to see this go on forever. So I'm really, really excited about that. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, you know, people can watch this in segments as well. So let's say they want to, you know, devote the first, you know, the first portion of it for a couple of hours, and then they can, if they, you know, don't want to continue that at that point, they can come back because they will have this link to be able to do that. So it really allows a lot of flexibility for our attendees, and it's going to be interesting to see. I have a feeling there is a good possibility that we may even have a larger audience than even before, because people again have flexibility as far as viewing opportunities are concerned. Okay, that is the end of my of our report for that, and the next would be board member comments. Board, what would you like to share? Member Rosenau.
I just have a question for staff. Any progress in replacing former board member Lavoy, who left us several months ago, had to resign?
I was actually going to mention that in my report. Go right ahead, Ken.
I know that the council is taking applications for the various boards and commissions that have openings, but I don't know much more of the status of that. I don't know if Flynn has anything more to report on that or not.
I can report some on that as well. Okay, so shall I go ahead? Yeah, okay. So what's going to happen is in November and December, we have two council members assigned to us to do a preview of the applications. And by the way, there are 15 in the queue as we speak. And so they will narrow that down to 5 or 6. And then the full council will then do the interviews to make that final selection. And so this is, process is to start this month, November and December, with the idea that it will be, that the new electees will be in place for the January meeting. And Eric, that would be the 2 seats that are coming up are actually, I'm terming out, and then Mr. Lavoy's seat. So there'll be 2 different spots coming up.
Thank you.
Okay. Shall I get any other comments from the board, or I just have one other thing to really mention? Yes, Member Nelson.
Are we on board member comments now, or are we still talking about conference planning?
We're board comments.
Okay, great. So a few things. The first one being, or all of it is for staff, actually. The first question for staff is, do we know when the Racket Club will go before City Council for its consideration to be designated?
We anticipate it going to the December 10th City Council meeting.
December 10th. Okay, thank you for that. And then my other question of staff is, for our December meeting, could we please have an update on all of the properties that many of us have brought up over the last year in our board member comments, such as Bank of America and the graffiti they had there. And then I know Member Dixon brought up the Twin Palms Apartments on Camino Real and wanting to get an update on that. And several other board members have brought up other properties over time. And if we could just circle back to all of those various things when you have time, if not for December, then maybe for January, just to get an update on where all those different things are and whether or not the board needs to do any outreach.
I'll work on that.
Thanks.
Okay, and I just have one final comment. I'd just like to express my thanks to the board for the well wishes last month. As you know, this is not like me to miss a meeting. This is broke my record, which broke after 6+ years of never missing a meeting. So I really, really appreciate this. It really does mean a great deal. So thank you so very, very much. And now we will move to staff comments.
I have no comments, and nor does Flynn.
Okay. Then I think it's adjournment time. The Historic Site Preservation Board will adjourn to the regularly scheduled meetings on Tuesday, December 1, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. And I assume it's going to be a virtual meeting. Very good. And I'm sure that the rest of you are eager to go on to something that everybody will be glued to the TV for the rest of the evening. So,
And I want to say, this is our reward for the last meeting. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Dan, I knew which one to miss.
Thanks a lot.
Oh, and Catherine, you did such a great job at that meeting. I
Yeah.
think about it all the time, and it's like, whoa.
Well, it was 3 hours and 8 minutes. 3 hours and 8 minutes.
It was really gutsy to do that, but I will never forget it.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, I was so delighted that we all agreed with giving a huge amount of time of discussion and thought-provoking ideas and all compelling. We just got along so well.
Yeah, you did.
That's the best thing. But oh my God, to get this done was.
Yeah, and Ken was pleased too.
Okay.
And so was I, sitting back and watching you.
I know. And you were there too, Dick. Thank you for.
Oh my God, it's such a different, I guess I'm going to have to get used to it. I just got another meeting coming.
And I'm glad this done. We have a house full of people and Ray's putting on the grill and it's scaring the hell out of me. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
One thing that-
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.